Receiving incoming transmission.
Incoming transmission.
Incoming transmission.
I'm sure you have many questions.
Transmission.
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 Welcome to Transmission. This is a show about you guys, the community of Meteor. Each week, Sashko from MDG and myself, Ben from OK Grow, we go to the Meteor forums and we ask you guys what is the most important things that you want to hear from us. And each week we report on that. So guys, go to the Meteor forums, look up Transmission, and see what's going on this week. Each show is going to be dedicated to you guys. And I promise to go as in-depth as possible. And Sashko is an awesome sport because he takes all the abuse. And he wears his bulletproof vest here. Transmission is available on YouTube under the Meteor channel. And it's available wherever podcasts are as an audio format. So go to Apple or go to, what's that? Big podcasting that people use.
Simplecast?
Overcast.
Ah.
Overcast is the app that people use. We are there, guys. So, like I said, we have some awesome sponsors. MDG is the best sponsor. They're sponsoring Sashko's time. And OK Grow, who I work for, is an awesome sponsor. They're dedicating my time towards this, as well as sponsoring the podcast part of it. And we love OK Grow, and we love Meteor. So we hope you guys do too. Full disclosure, and then we're going to get into the topics. Sashko and I are individuals. We have our own individual view on things, and that's what this show is about. It's given us freedom to talk about our views on things, and we have some educated points that we want to share with you guys. But by no means does that mean that it's something official from MDG or something official from OK Grow. But it's kind of like the line in between, and we want to give that to you guys, but we have to give disclosure. It's our own words. Welcome to show number 2. We're going to break this up into 3 parts. Show number 2, part 1, is going to be about GraphQL, Reactive GraphQL. Show number 2, part 2, is going to be about how open source is Meteor really. And show number 2, part 3, is going to be all about why Webpack wasn't included in 1.3. And we went with modules instead, and the ramifications of that in the future. Sashko, how was your week, man? You took the week off, eh?
Yeah, pretty good. I took the week off, but it's hard to stay away from I have a itchy trigger finger to check my Meteor stuff because I do that so often. But yeah, I went to Sundance. It was a great time. Saw some really weird movies. Definitely recommend that. If somebody's really into movies, you should go check it out at least once.
Was there any movie that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I really like this one movie that actually got bought by Netflix, so you can check it out later, probably, called Tallulah. It's pretty cool. It has Ellen Page, and it's about her kind of almost accidentally kidnapping a child from this bad mother and then taking care of it for a while. And it's the plot is pretty weird, but there's definitely some great insights into just general humanity, and it's just a fun time to watch as well.
Very cool. Very cool. I missed you, man. Dude, you guys dropped a lot of stuff just before you took off on the bus.
Yeah, we just kind of announced some stuff and then dropped the mic and peaced out.
Seriously.
So that was fun. I tried to keep up with all the discussions, though. There's been a lot of great feedback and just general excitement. Hitting the top of Hacker News again in one or 2 weeks. So doing well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is worth it, though. So this is part number 1 of show number 2, and we're going to be talking about Reactive GraphQL. Now, this is a huge topic, so guys, this might run longer than the 20 minutes that we want to be aiming for, but we're definitely not going to do 1 hour. We got to keep each other accountable, Sashko.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Reactive GraphQL. For those who don't know, could you give a quick overview of what GraphQL is, and then kind of go into what makes Reactive GraphQL different?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to look at this from the point of view of what it means for Meteor developers. The blog post is, there's a blog post about this in the Meteor blog called Reactive GraphQL. If you guys haven't read the backstory, But the blog post is targeted towards just developers in general, and problems that people face in Meteor and outside of Meteor with data loading. They're using Meteor DDP or REST or anything like that. And I think for Meteor developers, there's a lot of features that people have been asking for all the time. Ever since Meteor was just introduced, it's been using a similar protocol called DDP for data loading. That involves kind of publishing data from the server, subscribing to it on the client, and then querying something like Minimongo, a data cache, to get your data out on the client. And so that's what you've been doing in Meteor for the last 3 years. And there's a couple of things that people have been asking for that we really wanted to build. The most important thing is being able to use other databases, right? So right now the current system is very hardwired to MongoDB. You use MongoDB queries even on the client in order to get your data into your UI components. And that means that things get pretty awkward if your data is either in SQL or maybe even in like a REST API somewhere. Now you have to munge those data sources to get them to look like MongoDB, so that on the client, even if you're using a REST API, you're still using Mongo queries to get that data out. And we think that it would be much better to have something which is explicitly data agnostic, so that on the client, you're doing whatever you want to do to get your data into your UI. But on the server, you can switch out where that data is coming from as much as you want, right? If you're using MongoDB and you decide that part of that is not working for you and you want to move that into a microservice, you should be able to do that without changing any of your client-side code and just switch data sources whenever you need, or have your stuff work in SQL or Mongo the same way. I think that's very important.
So, and that language that you're talking about, the agnostic language, is what GraphQL is.
Exactly, yeah. So rather than using MongoDB queries, we use this new query language that Facebook has introduced called GraphQL, which is, in some ways, it's both more powerful and simpler than Mongo query language. So the most important thing that GraphQL does is it lets you, true to its name, traverse edges between nodes. So basically what that means in normal language is if you have relationships between your data or associations, for example, you have a user and they have some blog posts, and those blog posts have comments, you can have one query that follows the relationship and generates you a tree of data that has the user and then all their posts and then all their comments all at once, which is currently very hard to do in any other system. Right? In Meteor, you have to write some complicated publication that gets all that stuff for you at once. In REST, it's basically impossible. You have to do a bunch of fetches to first get the user, then get the post, then get the comments. And GraphQL is the only language we found that really lets you very easily get all the data you want at once. And it's also very database agnostic. So you could be storing your users in MongoDB and your posts in a REST API and your comments in like a third-party service. And from the point of view of the client, it's all the same. You just use the same query.
Wow. That's amazing. And now you guys
very
want to
exciting.
take that one step further with reactive GraphQL.
Exactly, yeah. So the real question here is, one of the things that is really great about Meteor's current system is that it's so easy to build things that are reactive, right? Because what reactive really means to me is you want to be using an app and know that you have consistent and up-to-date data. Like if you're looking at your GitHub issue tracker, it's nice to know that you're looking at the actual up-to-date state of the issues rather than something that's outdated, so you have to refresh the page. And that's something that GraphQL currently doesn't have great support for, because it's all about just fetching data once. And they're also looking at building in subscriptions into GraphQL.
Yes.
But we think that the current proposal, the current proposal for that doesn't match how good the Meteor user experience around that is right now. Because we think the experience should be, you just fetch some data from the server and you flip a switch, and now you get the most up-to-date version of that data all the time. And the default should be that you see data that is consistent and up-to-date. And then if you want to turn that off, you should be able to turn it off if you want to have that be more scalable, or you don't need reactivity for a particular part of the page. We think that's the part of the Meteor developer experience that makes things really special. And so we want to bring that to the system, which we already know is really good at loading multiple data sources and stuff like that. And that's the hard part.
Very cool. Very cool. I am stoked because this is huge. I don't know if people realize how huge this is. Like from a business standpoint, from just the base of what Meteor is going to be in the world coming forward. But how are you guys going to pull this off technically?
Yeah, so far all we've released is kind of this vague, it's kind of a statement more of all the problems we're trying to solve than how we're going to actually do it.
And this kind of like goes like last week, what you said, like where you wanted to be like guide driven development or blog driven development.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the most important thing is to start with the problems that you want to solve, then like the technology you want to use for that, right? It's not like, oh, how do we get Relay into Meteor because Relay is popular? There's a certain set of problems that a lot of developers face, and we want to figure out the best way to solve them, and we think that GraphQL is that way.
Very cool. So how are you going to do it, man?
Yeah, that's right. So we only want to officially publish the things that we are pretty sure about, right? So we're 100% sure about this GraphQL thing right now. We're 100% sure about these problems we want to solve, and we have a lot of ideas and prototypes internally about the exact way in which we're going to solve it. And we hope to post much more concrete data maybe in the next week, next 2 weeks. I think we just want to be posting this stuff all the time to keep people up to date. But I can give you basically a basic overview, which is going to be, it's going to be a dependency tracking system. So if you use something like Tracker, you might be familiar with this, which is when you access data, it's possible to record that you access that data and then later use that information to tell you that the data is updated, right? So how do you, if you have a database which is totally not reactive, like Postgres, right? There's some ways to get triggers into that, some ways to get real-time data, but we don't want to limit ourselves just to databases that have a real-time system. So what we want to do is on the application level, when you're inserting into the database, you note that you insert into the database and you fire that off to a central and validation server. And then when you read from the database, you also register basically a listener to those dependencies. Okay. So you can say, I fetched rows 1, 2, 3 from the database. And then when a different Meteor app or like any other server inserts into the database, it can publish a change and say, hey, I changed rows 1, 2, 3 of the database. And then you know that changed. And basically this is just the underlying system. So we're going to build lots of layers on top of that to make it just as easy to use as Meteor's current system. But the hope is that we'll let basically anyone build a super simple wrapper for any database they want, right? Because up until now, you've only been able to use data sources which are like explicitly supported by Meteor.
Right.
And to build a live query thing for an arbitrary database, you need like a PhD in database engineering, which most people don't have. So I think the core of the system is you should be able to use any data source you want and still take advantage of Meteor's system without having to do a lot of engineering.
That is awesome. So does this look like it's going to be a node server, like sitting like in the middle? And you got the client on one side, you got all these databases on the other, and you possibly have another back end?
Yeah, so the way I'm thinking it's going to look is, so you're still going to have your application server. That's still just going to be like the same way you have your Meteor app that runs a server somewhere. It's going to be the same. But I think in addition to that, there will be an extra server sitting somewhere, which is going to be running these dependencies. So right now, if you want to communicate between like a Rails app, for example, and a Meteor app, the only sensible way to do it, I think, is to push data into the same MongoDB database. And the MongoDB is like the source of real-timeness and the source of truth and data at the same time.
Right.
So I think the idea here is to split that out and have any database that you want be the source of data.
Okay.
And have a different server, which is the source of the real-timeness, right? So you have one global server where all your Meteor servers are talking to that to push their dependencies around, which will be like automatic. And then you have whatever database you want that sits under that doesn't need to be reactive in any way. And I think like this is the design we're going with right now. But obviously like we're going to validate that it works, before there's still obviously like months of work here to go before we know that it works for production users. But we're going to talk to people with all kinds of apps. People have Meteor apps, people have like non-Meteor apps, Rails apps, Java apps, because everyone's realizing this need to take their data from multiple sources and aggregate it together using something like GraphQL. And so we want to make sure that we get people in on it who aren't just Meteor developers that have a specific set of needs, but people who have all kinds of different needs so that you're not locked into a particular way of thinking.
Yes. Yeah. And this is going to be huge. It's going to open up a huge market. And we knew this was going to happen, but how you guys are pulling it off and the introduction to GraphQL is very elegant. I am super excited. So here's the thing, like up to this point, like being in consulting, working for OK Grow, like chasing greenfield projects for Meteor is like what we really had to do. But now when we're opening it up, where we're putting this reactive layer in, and you can access any kind of database in the back end, then you're opening it up to anything, you know.
That's right.
And people could now incrementally bring Meteor into a larger ecosystem, so it doesn't have to be greenfield. And you guys are chasing like enterprise and getting SQL support and having it so that this reactivity is just working out of the box with existing data. It's just very excited for the future. I'm very excited for 2016 just because of this.
Yeah, and there's so much other stuff coming that, you know, we shouldn't go into here because that's going to be a whole other thing. But I think you really nailed it. Like, that's the most important part is today, you know, you can't just go to somebody who has a Rails app and be like, why don't you try Meteor? Because you're going to be like, okay, I don't want to rewrite my entire application, right?
Right. And instantly it has turned off a huge part of the developer community. They're like, well, I just don't have time to look at that because that's like a whole gorilla that I need to learn.
Yep. Yeah, and what this does is, you know, Meteor, I think, at the end of the day, has always been kind of like a UI development platform, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not about, like, back-end workers that are, like, doing cron jobs, you know, and it's not really about, like, you know, CSS animations. It's about the whole part in the middle, and this is what this is really targeting. It's saying, you know how to write your back-end because you probably already have one for your app. Yeah. You know how to write CSS animations because you have, like, a designer who's been studying that for, like, 10 years. But like the part in the middle is the part where everyone has all the trouble, right? Right now people are using REST APIs, but they have so many problems. And just having something you can drop in the middle that will just like solve all those problems for you is really what we're aiming for.
Yeah, yeah. So stoked. So stoked. So this is going to be the primary baby for the data team that you're talking about?
Yeah. So for now, I think we're trying to charge as straight ahead on this as we can. And ideally, we'll be able to bring in some more contributors because there's a lot of different components to build. Basically, we're trying to decouple it so that people could be working on different parts. For example, there's going to be like an Angular integration for this, right? Like, you know, we don't necessarily have to build that. Maybe there's somebody who's really excited about that can build that for us. But yeah, so right now we want to get this project started and get it up and running as fast as possible before we turn to other data-related things, right? Like client-side data management, for example, would be something that this team would do in the future after this project.
Interesting. Yeah, and that was a question. Oh man, I shouldn't. We got to stay on time. We got to stay on task. Let's do this. We're not going to turn this one topic into 50 minutes. What does Facebook think of this? What does the GraphQL team over at Facebook think of all this?
Yeah, so far we've just had a initial conversation with them. We reached out to them. We were like, hey, we want to build this. We want to make it easy to use with different kinds of databases. We want to make it easy to use with different kinds of clients. We have some of our own ideas about how to build reactivity. And they also emphasized, right, that they are, you know, they're also working on building subscriptions into GraphQL. So there'll be some interesting conversations there. I think right now the state is we want to come up with something more concrete before we come back to them again and say, hey, what do you think about this? I think that if Facebook is not interested in the things that we're building and we're building on top of GraphQL, that's going to be bad for everyone. So we want to make sure that we're all working together, you know, in the same direction versus pulling in opposite directions. Because at the end of the day, it should be about improving the developer ecosystem as a whole, not like trying to land grab a certain part of it or like trying to have our own super special thing.
Wow, that's massive.
I don't know. It's hard to see if it will work out.
Right.
You know, at this point. But right now, for example, what I'm doing is I'm looking deeply at Relay and trying to map out all the different parts. I know that Facebook has said that they're interested in making Relay a bit more modular so that people can use different parts of it in their implementations. So my next goal is to figure out how Relay works internally, maybe write a post about that so that other people who are interested in that can figure it out, and then talk to them and say, like, you know, what parts can we use? What parts can we help you with?
Yeah. That's going to be a very big challenging part of this whole thing, is to get like buy-in and cross-team support. Man, I tip my hat to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the kinds of hard problems that Meteor has historically almost shied away from, because I think a lot of the time those are harder than writing the actual code, right? Like
Mhm.
we could go and rewrite Relay from scratch. It would take a long time and it would be expensive, but we could do it. I think it's even harder to work together with everyone, make sure that we're all doing the right thing, because writing the code is one thing and getting people to use it and getting people to be happy about it is another thing.
Absolutely. Like, you know, well, more than anyone else, that the open source world is very emotional and passionate.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, so in the past, MDG has written so much of your guys' stack, like by yourself. And this almost seems like a new leaf being turned, where now you guys are opening up and not only taking like what really is the best of that's out there in the open source world, which has always been in your mission statement, but now like you're building on top of that, and that just even makes me more excited for the future. So
yeah, me too.
you guys are rocking it. Okay. So in the past, we had a hint from MDG that like you guys were looking into Webpack and how interesting it was, and was it David that wrote a blog post somewhere about how he was looking into Webpack and how he liked it?
Yeah, that's right. He did.
And so with that little hint, all of a sudden, like all of the media world was like, Webpack. Oh, let's go learn Webpack. Blah, 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 blah. And then talks about 1.3 came out and said, oh, we're not going to like look at Webpack right now. And we're going to get into that later. But I just framed it that way because I was wondering, wait, if this GraphQL integration, if it's like really locked in, or if it might go the way of the Webpack integration, where it's like you guys like investigate it more and you guys might be like, this might not work. Like, can you give us a sense of how, what you're thinking, or can you guys pull it off, or how confident you are pulling it off?
So I think not to go too far on this other topic, but I think the Webpack thing is not, we're not saying that Webpack is bad and we don't want to use it.
No.
It's just not the most straightforward way to get the features that people are looking for in 1.3.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to do this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just saying that I think that's where we're always coming from, is not like integrating a certain technology, but here's the features we want to get in. How do we do this like in the best way possible?
Mm-hmm.
For the GraphQL thing, this isn't an investigation of GraphQL. This is like, we're working on it right now.
That's awesome.
There was never a point in time where we said we're definitely working on a Webpack integration for Meteor. But this is us saying we're definitely working on the Meteor Reactive GraphQL server right now, and we're going to do what it takes to get it to happen. Right? We're putting real people behind it. We want to make sure that it's something that people in the wider JavaScript community can get excited about by building different decoupled components and building them as fast as possible. Right? We're building it so that it's compatible with other GraphQL data sources. Right? Again, going all in on the incrementally adoptable thing. Right? If you're using Relay on the client, we hope that you would be excited about using our GraphQL to SQL adapter, for example, which we're going to build, so that you can use Relay on the client if that's what floats your boat, and then have a super easy way to get your SQL data out on the server using Meteor's data wrapper. And so I think like building things that are as small as possible and getting them out as fast as possible will be the easiest way to get people in the general community excited about it, because they can be like, oh, I was looking for this kind of solution to a very specific problem. I'm not interested in the whole like full solution right now because I already have something working, but I want to drop this in and try it out.
Very cool. With the architecture that you're designing right now and you guys are experimenting with, are these things going to be completely separate from the monolithic repo of Meteor? Like, are you guys going to try and like break it up?
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a direction that we want to go with for all of our stuff. So I think there's, in the JavaScript community as a whole, there's the idea of having very small modules that solve very specific problems. And I think that's very awesome from a technical point of view. So being able to switch out different modules that don't work for you, or update them individually, or fix small bugs in them when you need to, is super important. And that's one of the things that I think has been kind of holding Meteor back, is it's hard to contribute to just a small part of Meteor because it's also hardwired together. So I think from a development point of view, a testing point of view, and a technical point of view, it's crucial that we develop this as a separate set of packages built on NPM with separate GitHub repositories, their own tests, their own contributions, possibly their own committers, even if we get people from the community. On the other hand, I think we don't have to adopt the part that people don't like about it, which is having to pick and choose different parts. Because the goal is 100% to build 20 different components, but 20 different components that you can use as one. That you don't have to pick and choose. You just, at the end of the day, when you're an end user and you don't care too much, you can just install one thing and have it just work the same way it works today on Meteor. Mm-hmm. But when you're a power user or you have special requirements, you can go ahead and switch out different parts as you need. Because I think without that, it's going to be hard to convince anybody to adopt such a big thing. Right.
You just blew my mind.
That's the goal. And I totally envision other parts of Meteor moving in that direction soon as well. Because I think, calling out to a different topic we're talking about today, I think that's one of the things that makes it so hard to contribute to Meteor today, is that you have to find out which folder it's in. Sometimes there's like 7 different packages that all are kind of like connected together, and it's hard to know how they communicate.
Yeah. 2 really quick questions. First one is, how big is the data team? Like, we know that you're on it. Cool.
Yeah. So to start out the investigation on this stuff, we got Justin Santa Barbara joined Meteor a while ago. He was working on Galaxy for a while, but he's like a database wizard. He had his own database company for a while. That was a YC company that Meteor acquired. So he's bringing the kind of like super in-depth technical knowledge and wizardry that I don't have.
That's awesome.
And then I'm there from the kind of developer experience and community point of view, trying to make sure that we're building the right thing in the right direction. And so we were the team just experimenting with the ideas in the first implementation. And I think one of our top priorities now is A, to start really building stuff, and B, to bring more people on. We're actually hiring a couple more people. We hope to bring in some community people for this as well. So
awesome.
We're trying to go full speed ahead as soon as possible on this.
So we get a lot of people listening to the show. Do you want to take this opportunity to advertise exactly who you're looking for this?
Yeah. Well, so I think, step 1 is engage the people who are already excited about this stuff from the community. Number 1 example is obviously Aeronoda. I think Aeronoda's work in the GraphQL stuff has been, instrumental in getting people excited about it, and it's super simple.
This is Aeronoda. This is Aeronoda number 112.
That's right. So I think, at the top of my list is making sure that we're working in the same direction, because I think he has some of the same ideas that we do.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's one thing. But other than that, I think our top priority is to publish some, basically a list of components we want to build and how they're going to interact. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be a call out to people who are interested in data loading in Angular, for example, to build an Angular connector, right? People who are interested in RethinkDB, for example, to build a RethinkDB connector that has the properties that we want. And I think that the thing that will really help out with that is if we publish basically a set of guidelines or requirements that we want people to fill in. So if you want to build a database driver for this GraphQL thing, you need APIs like 1, 2, and 3, and then it will fit in nicely. And that I think will make it a ton easier for people to contribute. Mm-hmm. And in terms of hiring, I mean, if you've done anything like this before, we would definitely want to hire you. Like, if you can show that you've either built something about data loading or solved a hard systems problem or solved a problem like this at your job when you were working at a company before, like, those are the kind of people we need.
All right. There's the call. We want all you guys to apply. All you PhD databases. Last question, and then I'll open it up to you if you want to say anything else. You hinted a couple months out, like what is your best guess? Is this going to be like 1.4, 1.5, 2.0, next year?
So I think that we want to decouple it as much as possible from that kind of thinking. So I think that what we want to do is build this as a totally parallel project. Right now, you can, in Meteor 1.3, you can load any NPM module you want, right? Mm-hmm. You can already use Relay with Meteor 1.3. So I think this is going to be like that to start with. We're going to build a totally separate project. If you want to use this in your Meteor app, you can just install it, and it will work. And then probably at some point, it's hard to say exactly what like Meteor version this will be officially included in.
Mhm.
But at some point, when we have the full stack solution, when we have accounts, when we have some sort of like automatic bindings, when we have adapters for the popular view layers, that's when we're going to go ahead and say, if you're building a Meteor app today, this is what you should be using. And then we're also going to, most importantly, publish ways to use your current data stack alongside the GraphQL thing, right? Which is what you would do if you wanted to start out with it right now. And then B, if you wanted to migrate entirely to the new thing, here's also how you would do it. But I think like the number one priority is to make sure that this isn't a situation where you're stuck, where you have to rewrite a bunch of stuff. You're going to be able to either use the old thing for as long as you want, or you can migrate incrementally to the new thing. And some of the stuff about decoupling, data loading is going to help a lot with that. And I think the Meteor guide is the right place to look for when you want to know when you should switch or if you should switch, right? At some point, the Meteor guide is going to say, use this thing, and it's going to tell you exactly how to do it and how to switch and how to use it in your app.
Super stoked. Super stoked.
I'm stoked too. I mean, I think this is my favorite project. Like, it's something that I feel like could really get a lot of people's attention.
Yes.
And solve a lot of problems for all kinds of developers.
This makes Meteor relevant to almost every web developer.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's like the best way to sum it up. And that's what makes it so huge. So,
well, if we can do it, yeah.
I have faith in you guys.
Thanks. We're
Yes.
doing our best.
Except I'm going to take up all your time doing this show. No.
No problem.
All right. So that was all my questions, and you were a champ, man. You killed it, dude. Do you have anything else that you want to like let people know about Reactive GraphQL that I didn't touch on?
I think that pretty much covered everything.
Yeah.
So I think the next thing to look out for is for us to publish basically a technical design document about what we're working on. And I think that'll be the point where we're going to start looking for some in-depth contributors to help build it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, in the show notes, I'm going to link to the GraphQL forum discussion. And it's been going on for a while, but definitely put your responses in there. And Sasha's going to be there. The data team's going to be there. They're going to be answering all this stuff. So as always, thank you, Sashko. This is episode number 2, part 1. Please stay tuned for the other parts that are going to be coming up.
Great.
Till next time, guys.
Thanks, Ben.